Okay, picture this. You've got a massive, high-stakes job opening to fill. A position where you absolutely, positively need someone you can rely on. So who are you calling? Your closest, most loyal best friend? Or that rival who's always tried to one-up you? I know it sounds completely crazy, but your gut instinct to put your trust in friends might actually be your single biggest vulnerability. Today, we're dissecting a concept that turns literally everything we know about loyalty completely upside down. The 48 Laws of Power Law, 2.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so excited to dive into this source material with you today as we unpack the 48 Laws of Power, Law 2, together. We're going to see exactly why trusting friends can so often lead to bitter betrayal and how learning to actively use your enemies is actually the ultimate strategy for undeniable power and success. It's a highly pragmatic, sometimes totally ruthless, but undeniably fascinating look into human psychology.
So the core thesis of Law 2 is simply this: never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. Now naturally, we all think our friends will be eternally loyal to us out of pure gratitude, right? But the source material argues that friends are incredibly easily corrupted by envy. Because they know you so well, the professional boundaries get blurred, and they can easily become spoiled and tyrannical. A former enemy, on the other hand, well, that's a completely different story. If you hire a former enemy, they have something to prove. They're motivated by mutual self-interest, not heavy emotional baggage.
Okay, let's dive into this. For today's explainer, our roadmap is broken down into 5 distinct parts: the danger of friends, the value of enemies, keys to true power, the strategy of conflict, and finally, the exception to the rule.
First up, Section 1, the danger of friends, or as I like to call it, the jaws of ingratitude.
Let's look at a historical case study that perfectly illustrates just how fatal this mistake can be. Back in the mid-9th century AD, there's this young, relatively inexperienced Byzantine emperor named Michael III. One day, there's a wild horse incident, and a peasant stable boy named Basilius literally saves Michael's life. Out of pure gratitude, Michael makes his new best friend Basilius the head of the stables, sends him to the finest schools, and eventually promotes him to chief counselor, completely bypassing way more qualified candidates, you know? But here's the thing: exposure to power profoundly changes Basilius. He constantly demands more money, which Michael just gives him. Basilius's ambition grows so incredibly toxic that he actually convinces Michael to let him murder Michael's own uncle just to consolidate power. And the ultimate betrayal? Once Basilius had amassed more money and allies than the emperor himself, he surrounded Michael with soldiers, had his former benefactor stabbed to death, and literally rode through the streets, brandishing his best friend's head on a pike to claim the throne.
Man, what a brutal story, right? It perfectly brings to life this amazing quote from Voltaire: "Lord, protect me from my friends, I can take care of my enemies." Michael III's fatal blindness was genuinely believing that his friends' love and gratitude would somehow outweigh the intoxicating, deeply corrupting nature of absolute power.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, the value of enemies, or the untapped gold mine.
So, if friends are such a massive liability, what on earth is the alternative? Jumping forward to AD 959 in China, we see this absolutely brilliant counter-strategy from Emperor Sung. Chinese history at this particular time was defined by a brutal repeating pattern. A general would kill a weak emperor, take the throne, kill his fellow generals to survive, and then a few years later, boom, he'd get assassinated himself by new generals. Just an endless cycle of paranoia. But Emperor Sung broke this centuries-old pattern. How? Actually, scratch that. It wasn't by executing his rivals. He invited them to a massive banquet. He got them drunk, casually explained that he knew they might be tempted to overthrow him, and offered them a radical deal. Give up your army commands, and I will give you massive estates, riches, and a peaceful, luxurious retirement. In one fell swoop, he completely emasculated their threat by giving them exactly what they wanted, without any of the risk.
But Sung didn't just stop there. He actively turned deadly foes into his most fiercely loyal subjects. When a rebellious king named Lu finally surrendered, Sung offered him wine. Lu hesitated, absolutely terrified it was poisoned. Sung just laughed, took the glass, and drank it himself to prove it was safe. From that day on, Lu was his most trusted friend. In another wild instance, authorities captured a rebel named Chen Shu, and Sung was handed documents proving Chen Shu's conspiracies. Instead of locking him up, Sung honored him and handed him a package for his journey home. Inside the package, the very documents detailing his conspiracy. Sung was basically telling him, "I know exactly what you planned, and I am sparing you anyway." This unexpected, overwhelming mercy toward defeated enemies created subjects who were far more reliable and grateful than any friendly minister ever could be.
Section 3. Keys to true power. We're talking distance, skill, and competence.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the ruthless psychological principles behind it. The core problem with hiring friends is that honesty rarely strengthens a friendship. Friends naturally hide their unpleasant qualities just to avoid offending each other. But worse than that, the very act of hiring a friend creates an inherent power imbalance. It feels like charity. It feels condescending. And slowly but surely, that manifests as hidden resentment and envy. Enemies, however, are a completely different psychological puzzle. An enemy expects absolutely nothing from you. So, when you hire them or spare them, they are highly motivated to prove they are worthy of the choice. The relationship is based entirely on mutual self-interest and competence, totally untainted by messy personal feelings.
And this whole dynamic is summed up so perfectly by Abraham Lincoln. Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? The text shares a fascinating modern example of this strategy in action. Back in 1971, Henry Kissinger was actually the target of an unsuccessful kidnapping plot by a group of anti-war activist priests and nuns. Instead of purely retaliating, Kissinger arranged a private, unpublicized Saturday morning meeting with 3 of his alleged kidnappers. He sat down, talked with them, completely charmed them, and actually walked out of there with Kidnap Kissinger buttons. One of them even remained his friend for years. Kissinger made it a deliberate policy to bury the hatchet and actively work with people who fundamentally disagreed with him.
That brings us to Section 4, the strategy of conflict, welcoming the fight.
So the crucial point is, what if you can't make them your friends and you just plain need an adversary? The source material explains that without enemies around us, we actually grow lazy. An enemy constantly at our heels sharpens our wits. Mao Zedong systematically utilized conflict to build power through 3 specific components. First, never pick a fight unless you are absolutely certain of long-term victory. Second, if you don't have an apparent enemy, well, set up a convenient target, sometimes even turning a friend into an enemy, just to keep your forces sharp and vigilant. And third, use that sharply defined enemy to clarify your own cause to the public, framing the whole thing as a grand struggle of good against evil. By having a clear-cut opponent, Mao ensured his followers never lost their sense of identity or purpose. The big lesson here, never let the presence of enemies distress you. A person of power actively welcomes conflict as a tool to enhance their reputation and focus their team.
Finally, Section 5, the exception to the rule, the fall of the favorite.
So, is there ever, and I mean ever, a tactical reason to employ a friend in the realm of power? Well, the sole exception where the text actually advises utilizing a friend is as a scapegoat, a tactic known historically as the fall of the favorite. If you're a person of power and your grand plans go terribly awry, you need someone to take the fall. Using a close friend as a convenient scapegoat works perfectly because the public will absolutely never believe that you would deliberately sacrifice someone so incredibly close to you. They'll just assume the friend truly must have been at fault. Of course, the text makes sure to note, once you play this card, you have lost that friend forever. So it's a brutal maneuver strictly reserved for expediency and sheer survival.
All right, let's bring the whole shebang together. The ultimate paradox of Law 2 is this: keep friends for friendship, work with the skilled, transform enemies into instruments of power. Trusting friends in matters of business or power almost always breeds laziness, entitlement, and ultimately, a total breakdown of boundaries. But skillfully identifying the sheer competence of an enemy, bearing the hatchet, and putting them in your service, that builds undeniable, deeply rooted power.
So I'm going to leave you with this one lingering, provocative question. Are your closest friends secretly your greatest liability in your professional life? Think really carefully about the people you rely on every day and consider whether a former rival might actually serve your interests so much better. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the 48 Laws of Power, Law 2. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive, and be sure to visit our website for the full breakdown of all 48 laws. Stay focused, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next explainer.